My name is Scott Reed, and I've been training with Development Tour for a number of years now. That's just my sort of a side job, though. Mainly I'm a consultant, and I've worked with a number of big companies and even have gone through some of the larger contracting companies like Udesic or Wintellect or things like that. This talk, and mostly what I deal with, is communications technologies and Azure to some extent. And this talk is on WCF Data Services, and we're actually going to go through, three different parts. The first is a little bit slide-oriented. It's an overview of what WCF Data Services is and why we want to use it. And then the second part, we'll talk about exposing WCF Data Services. And then we'll talk about consuming WCF Data Services and how we can take an existing two-tier app and convert it over to use data services, and how easy it is to transition. Or not easy, as the case may be. Okay, so WCF Data Services is a solution that is designed to make it easy to expose data in a RESTful way. So many of you have probably written WCF services before to do this, and you know that you have to do web gets and web invokes and so on, or you may have written web API to do it, and same sort of thing. You have to do a get method and a get all and a put and post and delete and so forth to expose every single type. WCF Data Services is designed to simplify all that. And it's been around for a number of years. It was first announced at Mix in 2007 in March as Project Astoria. And then it went through a name change as it was released in .NET 3.5 SP1 in August, so that it was called ADO.NET Data Services. And then there were a couple of updates, and eventually it was renamed to be WCF Data Services to basically show that it was written, underneath the covers as WCF. WCF was being utilized. This wasn't an either-or, it was a on top of, in addition to sort of relationship. And then the 5.0 version was released in April 2012, and many times during this history they've gone out of band. They've released web releases or NuGet packages or so on, and I believe we're on actually like 5.5 now, or maybe, yeah, I think 5.5. And so obviously they're keeping it up to date. They've they make small enhancements every so often to make it easier. And another name that you might know WCF Data Services by is OData, and that is the protocol that is used when you expose your service in a RESTful way. It uses OData underneath the covers. That's the protocol, and they standardized that protocol, and they actually released it to the web. In fact, we can bring up a browser real quick, and we can go to odata.org. And this is the page that talks all about the Open Data Protocol. There's a nice little video here. There's plenty of documentation and how to get the libraries in various environments. Okay. And those of you who have tried to expose data through WCF in the past will find the motivation for WCF Data Services and OData is very straightforward and easy to understand, because when you expose data via WCF, you're really exposing operations, right? You've attributed those operations with web-get and web-invoke and so forth, but that's really what you're doing. And the problem that you run into is one of too many methods. You're writing too much code to expose your data. You have to write the code, you have to maintain the code, right? So the first problem is that you have to have one method for each operation, right? So if you want to be able to both read your data and write your data, it generally means that you have to write 5 operations per type that you're exposing. Right? So if I've got, customers, orders, and products, and I want to be able to read and write all 3 of those, it means I've got about 15 operations that I have to write and maintain. Right? One for the create, one for the read all, one for the read one for the update, and one for the delete. Right? So it's your basic CRUD. So you have to take that multiplication factor into account. But oftentimes it's worse than that, because you have to expose a method for each query type. So even though I'm only talking about orders and I'm not dealing with products and customers, etc., I still may want to expose many different ways of getting the list of orders. So I might want to say get orders by product, by customer, by order ID, by category, etc. There's a ton of different ways, and I, as a service, have to anticipate all of the ways that all of my clients want to call my service and provide for them. Right? So it's really my job, unfortunately, under WCF, to expose these methods. They're controlled by me as the service, but ideally it's the client that knows how they want to query the data. They know what sort of app they're writing. They know what sort of query they need in order to support that application. So if you take into account the 5 per type and the possibly infinite number per type, that's a lot of methods that you're writing. And so that's really the problem with using traditional WCF. So WCF Data Services is a new way of thinking about that problem. Right? Rather than taking and having to write operations, we already have, we're talking about REST, so we already have HTTP verbs, and those HTTP verbs map cleanly to the create, read, update, and delete operations. So why not go ahead and utilize those? And then rather than exposing the operations on the data, you just say, I would like to expose orders. So one line of code, you can say, I want to expose orders. And you can say, I want to expose it just read, or I want to expose it read and write. Right? Rather than having to maintain multiple different methods per type. And when the change is needed, right, the client needs a new way of querying the orders, let's say, rather than having to recompile the service to support those client needs, the client just sends its needs in the URI. The client says, I want to query this thing, this particular way in the URI. Now give me my data. And I don't have to expose new ways. The clients can express their intent in the URI that they use. So one of the common, cons you hear, but it's not true, is basically WCF Data Services is just exposing the database to the web. But that's not at all true. What you're exposing is a data model. So you've already got a layer of indirection between the database and what you're exposing. And then, as we'll see, not so much in this talk, but in a advanced talk that's coming in, I think, 3 weeks, we'll see all of the different ways that you can also control what it is you're exposing in various more advanced ways. So anyone that's done that WCF Data Service or used WCF to expose data before is totally familiar with this, and you should all be, it should all make sense why you would want to use WCF Data Services over just straight WCF services. Let me just check, make sure I don't have any questions at this point. Nope. Okay, good. Let's move along. Okay, so hello, come to me. There we go. So we talked about that open data protocol before, right? And the idea is that the protocol specifies formats for exposing data, both querying, reading, and writing data through a set of URI conventions. And if we go back to that page, we go to like documentation, and I think it's here. Not there, sorry. Core document, let's try that maybe. There we go. So it talks about the data model and the service model, and then somewhere here we're talking about the request formats. Okay, so here are some of the things that you can do in terms of querying. You can filter. So this is like the example of a where clause, right, where you want to filter where the price is less than $10. You can do many types of functions, substrings and trims and concats, date functions, math functions, type functions, etc., to help in your filter. You can do things like selecting, so I only want certain types of data to come back. That can help with the amount, the payload that is being returned. And that's something that obviously the client should be in control of. You can also do things like include. I don't know if I saw that one yet, but you can say I want to, there it is, expand, right? You can expand the you can either expand parents or expand children based off of the query of objects you've returned. You can do ordering. You can do things like skip and take. So if you want to page through your service, oftentimes that means that you have to expose an additional method that allows the page number and the item count in it. So here, this is just supported by default if you turn on an OData query, right? They can use the top and the skip together to basically page through your data, and you as a service don't really need to worry about that. There's an inline count. So this is basically getting a count of information in the query, and you can use a format to basically switch between JSON and XML or Atom. Okay, so those are the sorts of things that you can do with the query. And as I said, the CRUD is based on the HTTP verbs, and you can actually batch multiple operations, like I want to add a new product and many different orders for that product into a single HTTP request. So it's also quite efficient and performant. Okay, and so one more slide here and then we'll jump into a demo. This is what it looks like to expose an entity data model. Now, the thing that you expose doesn't have to be an entity data model. It can be any sort of model, and I'll talk about other types of models, I think, in a couple of slides. But many people already use Entity Framework as their ORM, and if you do, it makes it trivial to take and expose that as a data service. So you'll need three things in order to do that. First is you'll need an endpoint, and that's represented by the part at the top here. So you're saying, this Northwind Data Service.svc file, and there are ways to, change the route and things like that. And we'll talk about that in the next talk. But this Northwind Data Service file represents the data service called Northwind Data Service, and then there's the class for it. So in the class, you have to specify which model you want to expose. And then lastly, you have to turn on which pieces of the model you want to expose. So here we've turned on every element, read and write. So you can do everything to everything, right? So that's a one-line change. But I could have said, I only want to expose orders, all, and products are read-only, and customers are read-only as well. Something like that. Okay, so that's enough intro. Let's go ahead and get started. So I have a Visual Studio 2012, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And actually, the first thing I'm going to create is just a class library, and that's where I want to put it. And we're going to call this thing Books Data. That's the name of our project. And the solution we'll call is Books Data Service. Okay. Awesome. And in the books data, I want to go ahead and create a entity model. So let me get rid of this class 1, and we'll say add new item. And I'm going to try and go slow so that you guys, the screen delay I know can be bad. So entity data model is what I'm selecting here. And I want a books model. I'm going to go ahead and say add. And it's going to bring up the wizard. And I'm going to say generate from a database. And I'm going to create a new connection. And I have an instance called SQL 2012 and a database name called books. And let me test it. Test is okay. Excellent. Okay. So when you're creating your entity data model, I mentioned that you're not exposing your database to the web, right? That there's this layer of indirection. And the first thing that you can do in this layer of indirection is you can choose which pieces of the database that I actually want to expose. So that's one thing. I can just leave out particular tables if I don't want them exposed. Okay, so I've selected these 4. I've left out sys diagrams. Obviously, that's not really important. I've left the default options there. I'm going to go ahead and finish. And then, of course, the other thing that you can do once this finally finishes here is I can take and rename, database, quote, table names, or like here's one that's called Title 1, which I don't really like. I'm going to call that book title. All right, so you can mess with the model after you've generated it, even when you've only generated a subset of the tables underneath there. So that's what I was talking about with the database, with the layer of indirection. You're not exposing your database to the web. You are exposing a carefully crafted model to the web. Okay, so that being done, let me go ahead and create a new project. And this one's going to be a WCF service. If I can find it. Why are these so hard to find? WCF service application. There we go. We'll just leave it called WCF Service 1. That's fine. Okay. And there's our, it has by default a, iService and a Service 1. We don't really need any of that. I'm just going to get rid of it. And what we do need is we want to add a new item. And this is going to be a WCF Data Service. Now notice I have a WCF Data Service 5.3 link. And that is because I went ahead and I installed the latest version of the tools, which you can get in a download. So if you search for WCF Data Services tools, there you go. So there's the 5.3 tools installer, and you can download and get that on your system, and then you'll see the same thing that I was seeing. Okay, so that's a 5.3 WCF Data Service. We're going to call this the Books Data Service. We'll click Add. Okay. And just like the slide showed, there is a Books Data Service. There is an endpoint, this SBC file. Let's see if I can view markup. That's what I wanted. Okay, so there's this SVC file that basically points to the Books Data Service. That's over here at the end. That's the endpoint, And then we have the code behind, which is what I was showing you initially. That's the class that inherits from data service. And then there's a to-do for you to fill in the name of your model that you want to expose. So for us, we had that books entities class that was generated from the ADO.NET data model. And because I haven't actually I haven't referenced the other assembly, I'm getting a little error here, but I'm going to use the resharper to go ahead and add the reference for me. Okay, and it also says I need a reference to entity framework. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to say manage NuGet packages, and I am going to say online, and I'm going to use that way of installing the entity framework. Okay, so now that I've done that, I have my books data service, which is a data service of, and then there's my model, that books entities class that was exposed. That's the generated class, right, this thing that I generated using my ADO.NET entity model. So that's basically exposing this as a service. And the last thing I said that we need to do is we need to turn on what data we actually want to expose. So that's the whole model, right? And we already have one layer of indirection. Another thing that we can do is we can choose which pieces of the model that we want to expose. So I'm going to go ahead and expose everything, and I'm going to expose it all period, right? So there's all read operations, all write operations, reading single, reading multiple, writing append, delete, merge, and replace. Right? So those are the various ways that you can restrict what can be done. And this is a flag, so you can combine these. But there's a couple of shorthands here for combinations of flags that we want to expose, and one of those is all. So I'm exposing both the authors and the titles and the publishers using this entity set writes all. So read and write. Now that I've done that, I can go ahead and set this to be my startup project and set this to be my start page, the books data service, and go ahead and give it a run. So it was that easy to go ahead and create one of these things. 3125 is the port that it chose. Oh no, we have an error. What do we do now? So this is one of the more common errors that you'll encounter, and I already know what the problem is because I did it on purpose. But I just wanted to show you that this is built on WCF. Okay, and I can prove that it's built on WCF because I can use WCF attributes and so on to modify how this thing is actually working. So I want a service behavior, and I want to say include exception details and false true. Right? You guys know that we can do that on a standard WCF service, and I did it on this WCF Data Service. And then if I run again, and it comes up, I should get a little bit more information. And yes, sure enough, it says the exception message is no connection string named books entities is found in the application config file. And that's because I created the entity framework model over in this project, and that's where I put my app config. And then I used it from the other project where I hadn't added in my connection string. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Actually, get rid of those and make it a little easier to read. So I copied my connection string from the books data over to the WCF service, and running one more time, we should see. Oops, we should see that everything works. Yeah. Okay, so this is the default page that you'll see, and it says that I've got 3 collections. I've got an authors collection, a publishers collection, and a titles collection. Let's go ahead and one of the nice things about exposing anything over REST is you can use the browser to sort of explore the data. So I want to go to the titles and notice that it is a feed. And the Internet Explorer browser that I'm using here, which I'm not sure why I'm using that one, has basically said, okay, this feed, I recognize this feed, and I'm going to turn on this feed reading view. But you can see that the feed is not very helpful at the moment. It's actually exposed in Atom, and if we paste it into Chrome, there you can see the XML in all of its glory. It looks pretty nasty, actually, especially in Chrome, because it doesn't format it at all. I can go into Internet Explorer, and I can say Internet Options, and I can say Content, and I can say Feeds and Web Slice Settings, and then I can turn off the feed reading view and click OK. Unfortunately, I have to close the browser to do it again, but if I grab this and I bring up another instance and I paste. Okay, so now we see the more formatted version. And let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, and move this so I can scroll up. Okay, so yes, it is a feed, and the feed is of type Atom, and it's comprised of a number of entries. These are all the titles that I have in my database. I scan these in using a little USB barcode reader, and I wrote a little ISBN lookup function, and I basically imported my book catalog as of about 3 months ago, and here I am exposing all of that so that people can query over this data using a RESTful format. And they can also subscribe to it because it is an Atom feed. They can put it in a RSS reader type program, and as I get new books, they can see those books come online. Okay, so that's really the basics of exposing a WCF data service. Are there any questions thus far? Oh, yes, we do have a question. Can OData be used to expose REST services that are intended to support HATE-OAS? If so, how? Yes, absolutely. These services are exposed using HATE-OAS. I don't really know how to pronounce that, but OAS is hypertext as the engine of application state. And basically, there are 3 levels of REST-based services. One that just uses the URIs, one that uses the verbs, and one that also advertises where to go from here. And that's what you're talking about with the hypertext as the engine of application state. And yes, absolutely. See up here in the entry section, there are 3 links that basically describe how I can further drill down into a specific book, or I can look at its publisher, or I can look at its authors, right? So all I need to do is I need to take that href and append it to my query, and there you have it. Now I'm looking at a particular book, right? This one happens to be Cain and Abel. So yes, absolutely. The links are advertised. That's one of the benefits of Atom, and they take full advantage of it here. Okay, good. Any other questions about the basics of OData? How to expose it? No problem, Christopher. Okay, well then let's move along. We've got a good amount to cover here, so we'll keep chugging. And I don't know if I'll finish all of the demos today, but there is, as I said, a follow-up webinar in 3 weeks where we dive into some more details. Okay, so that's what we've seen thus far. Once you've done that, you get this top-level feed, which describes all of the collections. You can drill into individual collection. Each feed advertises, each entry in the feed advertises where to go from here if you want to find out more information. And you can sort of just use the URI window as an explorer to look at the data, to explore it. So the format that we were just looking at is the Atom format, and as we mentioned, it includes links to edit or to obtain related entities. Okay, so when we're addressing entities, we use the base path, right? And we can use key values in parentheses and navigation properties using the /. So that's the base URI up at the top there, the Northwind service, and we can look at all the customers, the specific customer ALFKI, that specific customer's orders, the first of their orders, the product in that first order, right? So we can drill down just using our address bar. And as I mentioned early on, because this is exposed using OData and it has a specific query operator support, not only can we get all of the orders, but we can start doing things like, I just want to see the top 2 orders, or I want to page through it. I want to skip the first 2 and take the next 2. I want to filter the orders by ship country. I want to order them by ship country, etc. There's a ton of things that we can do here, and so the client is not really limited. Now, what's essentially happening here is the client is probably going to use a client-side library to make this easy, and the client's going to do some sort of link on this collection that they get back. And then when they go ahead and they say execute, then the engine, the client, the data context on the client side is going to go ahead and create a URI. And that URI is going to be sent to the service side. So there's not going to be any heavy data being passed back and forth here, right? It's just the query. And then that's the get, and the URI will be taken by the data service on the service side, and it will change it back into LINQ, execute that LINQ against the database, or the data model rather, and then take the resulting information and serialize it back to the client. So it's very efficient. If we say skip 2, take 2, we're only going to get 2 entries returned, right? We're not going to get all of the entries and then filter on the client side. We're only getting the entries that we ask for. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. Okay, so yeah, let's talk about this a little bit. I mentioned early on, there's a bit of a formatting issue on this slide. I mentioned early on that it doesn't have to be an entity model, right? Really, it can be any POCO class that you create, and any repository or class that exposes public iQueryable properties. That's really what you need. You need the data service key specified, like which of these properties you want to use as the key, and you need a public queryable property. And that's really it. So let's go ahead and create one of these person objects in the people repository and show how easy it is to expose custom models. So I'm going to create a new project. This is going to be a class library, and this is going to be called people data. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this to be person. And I'm going to use prop, and we'll have string name and a prop, which is int age. And we'll go ahead and say that this has a data service key. And it's should we reference, Microsoft Data Services? Should we reference Data Services? Again, I'm going to go ahead and say right-click on the references and say Manage NuGet Packages, and I'm going to search for Data Services. And then I'm going to expose, or I'm going to reference, let me try one word. That was my issue there. WCF Data Services client. Okay, and that's what I want to use. Accept. Okay. And now that we got that, yes, it recognizes that that's in System Data Services Common, and we want to say that the name is the data service key, and then we'll go ahead and add that person repository. So we'll go grab that code, people repository, sorry, add new item class people repository, and we'll paste that in. And I'll just go ahead and create some people here so we can see that it's exposed correctly. New person, and this is going to be name of Scott and an age of 39. Don't tell anybody. And we'll just use my whole family here. So we'll say my wife. Definitely don't tell her that I'm telling her age to everyone. And then we've got Charlotte is my daughter. She's 9, and Julia is my other daughter, and she's 7. Okay. So great. We've got our person collection up there. And then the key part here is we have a public queryable of people. And now I can go ahead and add a reference to that people data, and I can go ahead and add a new item, which is just like we did before, a WCF data service, which is the people data service. And this time we want to use that people repository that we created. Repository. Yep, that's the one. And we want to go ahead and expose everybody. There's only one collection here, so there's really only one option, and that is the people, right? That's the name that we could use if we wanted to single out which one to expose. And we'll just say all again. We'll build. Okay, and we'll go ahead and run. Sorry, I'm doing this on my laptop, and it sounds like it's working hard. Sorry about the fan noise. People, data service. We have an error again. We forgot to expose. Oh, no, no. What did we do there? Sorry, let me check. People, data service, error encountered. Okay. Well, let's do what we did last time, and let's just see what's going on here. Let me grab this. I probably forgot to do something. I just can't think of what it is. Stop debugging. Paste. Okay, build. Somebody actually has probably seen what I did. How do we filter, edit, and add new records? We are definitely going to cover that. That's coming up next. So I will get you, Nassim. I forgot to make that. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. We have a Microsoft Data Services Client 5.5. This is something that I've hit before, and generally it's caused, it's probably a good thing to show you guys. Generally it's caused because, yeah, this is 5.3. So when I created the WCF Data Service, it used the latest version that it had, but of course that's not the latest version there is. So let's go ahead and manage our NuGet packages, and let's look at our updates, and then we'll just go ahead and update. I should have just said update all. I think it'll probably do it because I think there's a direct line of dependency among all these. Yeah, okay. So I went ahead and I upgraded those to the latest version, which is what I was using on the other two projects anyway. So, okay, now that we've done that, let's see if we get a better answer here. People. Excellent. And there's our people collection, and then we can see the list of elements. And if I go back over here, we can see it broken down. And there's our entry for Scott, Chantal, Charlotte, and Julia. Okay, so that's how to expose a common model over WCF Data Services instead of an entity model. Okay, the next thing we want to talk about, and then we'll get into the updating portion of the talk, is customizing the Atom feed. So as you recall, if I go back over here and I turn on the feed view, let's see if I can just read. Nope. The feed looked like crap, right? It didn't tell us any information. Normally there's some sort of title here, and then the dates are all the same. So we might want to adjust both of these things. Like we could use the, if I had done it a little bit differently, we could have used like the date of birth as the date instead of the, I just did age, but if we had done date of birth, then we could have used that as the date, and then we can have the title being the name of the person. And so to do that in a custom model, right, you just you throw on an attribute which basically specifies which element you want to utilize as the title in the feed. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that here on top of the item that we're talking about. And I'm saying, this is saying basically I want to use the name as the title property. This is either like plain text or HTML. And then the keep in content means that since I'm promoting this property up to the title, do I also want to see it when I'm looking in the details of the item, or is it just in the title and it's not in the details? So here I'm saying, yes, I want it to be in both places. So now that I've done that and I build, I go ahead and refresh here. And now you can see that those names that I provided are listed in the title. And you can do similar things for the date. Now, this is an interesting part, and we're starting to get a little bit underneath the covers. If you're exposing an entity model, you actually have to go modify the EDMX file. And this feels really yucky. For several people actually that have used Database First, when I consulted with them, I wrote a little program that would go and apply these values where they needed to, so they could store it sort of in a separate XML file and apply it to the entity model sort of after the fact. So every time they generate it, does that for them automatically. But basically what you need to do is you need to add in this new namespace, this data services metadata namespace. And then you need to add some additional attributes to the particular property that you want to become the syndication title or the syndication date, etc. So, and same sort of properties, right? Just the title, what if it's plain text or HTML, and whether to keep it in the content, right? So these are the same attributes, they're just being applied in a different way. And why is that? You know, why couldn't they come up with a different way of doing it? And the answer lies in this. So here's the people data service, but let me go back to the books data service. And let me throw on, so going back to the books, right, that's what it looks like. I'm going to throw on a $ metadata. And lo and behold, what we have here is the entity model. The entity model is the database is the metadata around what's being exposed. Okay, so they don't do any reflection or runtime information to figure that out if it's an entity model. They just take the entity model that's there and they expose it to the web, right? So this is the metadata, and that's why you have to go in and put the properties on the element that you want to appear as the title. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that just to show you that how easy that is, or how hard that is, as the case may be. So I'm going to right-click on my books model EDMX, and I'm going to say Open With, and I'm going to say the XML text editor. You can use the one with encoding or without encoding, it doesn't matter. And it says, hey, it's already open. Do you want to close it? Yes, I do. So now that I've closed it, it auto-detects the encoding, and I'm looking at the EDMX model in XML. And those of you who are familiar with Entity Framework, I mean, this isn't really an Entity Framework talk, but you know, it's basically comprised of 3 sections. You've got the storage stuff, which describes what's going on in the database, the conceptual stuff that describes what's going on in the code, and then the mapping layer, which is mapping the storage to the conceptual. And then you've got all this designer crap, which they really should have put in another file, and I've always been pissed at them because of that. But ignoring that yucky stuff, you've got the 3 layers, and what we're talking about here is the conceptual model. Remember, there's the layer of indirection between the storage and what's actually being exposed by the data service, and that's in the conceptual model. Okay, so let's go ahead and make those changes. We'll go to the slide and we'll copy this little namespace right here. And we'll paste it in. Okay, so I've done that. And then I'll go ahead and I'll add these properties to the particular element that I want to become the syndication title. Let's see, so this is the containers, here's author, here's publisher, here's title, there's book title, right? And it's already got some properties related to, this is a string, it has a max length of 500, etc. And I just want to paste in these additional ones. Right. Let me clean it up a little bit, and then we should be good to go. Okay, and we will now reload it, open with, and we'll use the data model designer. Yeah, okay. So it reload, it looked exactly like it did before, but if we rebuild now, and we go back over here to the books data service, and we go to the titles, feed, you can see that the book titles have now started appearing as the title in the feed. And you can do the same thing with dates and so on. Right? Makes sense. Okay. Any questions on that? Holy cow. Yes, we have quite a few questions. Let's see. So we've said we'll get to a seam for the filter, edit, add, and new. In fact, filter I can show you already. I'm sorry, but the rest I'll need to wait just a second. So if I go back into titles, so remember there's I can look at a particular title that way. What am I looking at here? Title 79404. I'm getting a 404 for some reason, so that was weird. Oh, because it's not shouldn't be it. So let's go back to the non-feed reading view, and I'll show you how you can do some filtering. But it's basically just using those, URIs and putting the elements in the URI. So let's go to content settings, turn off the feed reading. Okay. Copy, kill, open, paste. Okay, and now if we say titles and we want to filter where the let's see, where the book title, that's what it is. And you can use like starts with, you can use length. So let me try and find a better one. Let's try format, where filter where format equals to, I think that's right, filter format equals to, is that right? Oh, that's not quite right. Hold on one second. Format. Is it format? And by the way, these things are case sensitive, which is why you should really use a library to do them. Okay, so that's the titles. 1 second. Let me just go to the OData.org. Documentation. And let's go down to $filter. Why did that not work here? Core document, sorry. Find $filter. Okay. Okay. Filter equals. I'm sorry, that was the problem there. Okay, so we'll say question mark $, filter equals format equals to. And let's try that. It's still not working. Hold on 1 second. Format equals filter equals. So one question is it a string or is it a format $filter equals format equals to. Oh, as I said, case sensitive. Nope. Ah, there it is. Okay, so you needed the $ or the capital in the format because it is case sensitive, and that's what we're talking about down here. And then it was not a string, it was regular int, so we did not need the quotes. So that's how you could filter by format as to. I'm not sure which format to is. Let's see if I can look here. Can't enable, that's a paperback. So this must be paperbacks. I've gotten all the paperbacks here. And you can tell the filter was applied if you just look at the size of the scroll bar. You know, here it's a teeny scroll bar. And let me use something like 3 because I have a lot less other types than I do. Oh, let's try even 4 maybe. Oh, and there's none, right? So you can tell that the filter is happening. Okay, so let's go back. That was the first question. Second question is, you have an extra comma when you put the person in the collection. That's not an extra comma. That's a habit I get into just to make the diffs easier. So you can have extra commas and enums and collection initializers. So what Sergio is talking about here is in the people repository, right? He's talking about this comma right here. And that's perfectly acceptable. And that way I don't have to modify it if I want to add another one in. It's just a single line that would be added. That's just a habit I get into. Okay. Then I would like to filter data based on the client that makes the request, which means the client will pass the parameter. I would like to filter based on the user. Okay, so Sergio, I'm going to get to that one, but unfortunately it's going to be next time, which is like in 3 weeks. However, if you've got like a project that you need to do, before then, the thing you want to look up there is query interceptors. So if you search for query interceptors, that's the way you do it. I'm not going to go into it in this talk, but I will go into the next talk. Okay, next question was, if my backing store isn't actually a database, for example, document management system, do I need to create an EDMX virtual DB for each resource? You need to create, so you either have to have a EDMX file, which you can do just from generating, from a database, but if you don't have a database, then you'll probably want to use a custom model, and you would have to have a property per type you want to expose. So hopefully that makes sense. Property per type I want to expose. Okay, good. Okay, and Sergio says he can wait. Great. All right, so I think that answered all the questions. Good questions. Thanks. Keep them coming. And let's move on to the next part of the talk. Okay, so the next thing is, how do I get the data out? On the client side, what do I need to do here? And of course, a very naive way to do it would just be to use REST, use web request or HTTP client or any of those mechanisms in order to grab the data and then parse it yourself. But that, as we said, that's sort of naive for a couple of reasons. One is the parsing it yourself can get kind of yucky. And the other is, in order to be able to generate these queries, you saw how difficult it was. I mean, that wasn't on purpose. Trying to get the formatting correct in this URI, right? Just to get it filtered by the format. And, I had to make sure that it was a capital, and I had to have a space here. And if it was a string, I would need quotes around the one, and I need to make sure it's a, question mark, $sign filter, etc. Right, so all that stuff is kind of painful to type out by hand and get correct. So it'd be nicer to use a client-side library in order to have that generated for us. And it's very easy to generate a client-side library because all you have to do is you add a service reference. As we said, this is a WCF thing, and you can add a service reference just like you can to a WCF service that's exposing its metadata through WSDL or something like that. And based on that, it can go ahead and generate all the client entities and so on that are needed. Okay, and what that's going to generate on the client side is a DataServiceContext class. Okay, so it's going to look exactly like you're connecting to a database, but you're not connecting to a database. You are connecting to a service, which is basically exposing the data of a data model. So you'll create, normally you'd have a using. You don't have to have a using here because the reason for the using statement is because database connections are limited, and you want to pool those, and you want to make sure that you are getting into the database, getting the data you need, and getting out. And so that's why all of the normal, like a Northwind entities, if I were to generate it using Entity Framework, they would have a using statement around the context. And it would basically start on like the fourth line here, and it would finish after the execute, right? That's where the using statement would, the open brace and the closed brace would be. So it generates this data service context, and it keeps track of the identity management. The change tracking, it's a little bit more manual than it is in Entity Framework, but it still can allow fairly easy change tracking. And then you can do an execute batch to allow batching operations. And I'll show all of this stuff in a demo in just a second. And as we said, the big benefit here is that now on the client side, we just write LINQ, right? I want to find categories where the category name is beverages, and I want to order by the product name. So give me that. And it takes that query and it turns it into a URI. And in fact, if we were to cast the query to a data service query, then we could see that URI even before we executed it and sent it. Right? So it'll do all that stuff for us so that we don't have to worry about formulating those things. And then in terms of the change tracking, we do have to be a little bit more explicit about what we're doing. So when we update an object, we need to call update object. When we add an object, we need to call add. And when we delete an object, we need to call delete. And then the relationships. So if I add a product in an order, I need to call a set LINQ, right? That basically says, or here I'm adding a product category, right? And I need to basically say I'm adding so I've already added a product and I've already added a category, and now I need to set the LINQ basically between the two. So it is a little bit more explicit than you might be used to, but it's still fairly trivial to implement an application that utilizes all this change tracking and so on. Okay, so let's jump out to a demo. Let me just check questions one more time before we get started here. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So in this demo, I'm gonna get it a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to remove this books data, and I'm going to add a books data that I used for the actual. So I mentioned that I created this books database by doing a USB scanner and scanning in all of my books just one at a time. And so I'm gonna actually show that application. That application is just a two-tier application right now, but I want to move my database up to the cloud so I can do this book entering from many different machines, for example. So I want to change it basically into a more three-tier application, maybe using a website or something like that. But here we're going to go ahead and say add existing project, and I have the books data that I created in the actual application. And it looks very similar to the books model we had. The only thing I've done is I've added a book format. So there's where we could have gone to find, one was hardcover, trade paper, mass paper, electronic. And then the other thing I did was I created a title extended class where I created some holder properties, a thing to basically split the comma-separated tags that users type in so that you can change them to something that's easily searchable by the database, and then a way to get to that enum more easily using the format instead of using the numbers. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Just those two additions, book format and title extended. And then let me go ahead and add in my two-tier application app here. That's got to be called Scan in Books App. Actually, let me copy this one. I'm sorry. Copy demos, books data service, paste, and then I want to go to it in here. Okay, because this one I'm going to be modifying like a crazy man. Okay, so we have our Scan in Books application. This is our two-tier application, and it's connecting directly to the database. If I run it right now, well, I could try to run it, but of course it may not work. Books Data Service. Oh, I removed those that project, and so I need to re-add the references. Okay, let me build again. Okay, Amazon book. Do what now? Book format. Doesn't make any sense. References, books data. I have referenced books data. Let me remove this reference. I don't know, maybe something got messed up and add this one. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Excellent. So we were able to build, and I can set as a startup project and run my two-tier application. And the first thing it's going to do when I launch the application is it's going to use, this is a WPF application, it's going to use data grid, and it's going to bind to the query directly against the database. And when I click in Add New, this pops up my little form here, and I can, hold on 1 second, and I can scan in a book and tab off, and there you go. There's my book I'm reading right now, Personal MBA, Master of the Art of Business. All right, so anyway, and then I can accept to enter that in the database, which I don't want to do yet because I only have a limited number of books piled up next to me. Okay, so that's our basic application that we're going to start switching over to use the three-tier model. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to remove Entity Framework and Books Data because that was all concerned with talking directly to the database, and I don't need that anymore. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and add a service reference to this, the Books Data Service that we exposed. In fact, because it's in the same solution, I can actually just click Discover, and it'll put in the URI for me. But now that I've added that Books Data reference, we'll call this Books Service Reference. We'll say OK. Okay. And it has generated us the book's service reference. And it's lying to us right now. It's saying that this is just a file or something, but we can't see anything. We can double-click on it and it just throws it into Object Browser. But if you click right up here at the top, there's a thing called Show All Files, and you can expand that. You can see all the things that were actually generated for us. Just like I said in the slides, you've got a books entities, just like we had a books entities before. Right, nothing changed here, but now instead of being a DB context, it's a data service context. Right, so it's a different animal altogether, really. So the next part is going to be kind of boring because we're just going to need to get the app compiling again now that we've referenced the books data service instead of the other context. And if I just build, we're going to see there's a ton of errors here, and mostly what they are is I need to add the reference to the book service reference. So if I clear up that everywhere I can. Okay, now the next thing it's saying is this book format, I don't know about this book format. Where is this book format? And this is the reason why I substituted that books data just to show you some of the additional work that you may have to do. So the EDMX file doesn't contain these additional properties. It doesn't contain the author's text and the publisher text. This is stuff that I've added, right, as a developer. It's not included in the model. It's just stuff for me interacting with this project. And this book format thing, I just created that myself. You know, I'm not using the EDMX model to do that. There is a way to do that, by the way, now, but I didn't do it just for demonstration purposes. So I need to basically get these over into my Scan in Books app, and this stuff lives on the service side, or it lives in an area I can't get to them. So I need to basically duplicate that over here in the client side. You could create a shared project, and you could link to the shared project, or you could use what is that called? The shared libraries or whatever, the portable class libraries, something like that. There's a couple of different ways you can do it, but in general, it's going to basically shear off all of those extended classes, and you're going to need to get them to the client side in order to be able to use them. This is even more difficult when the client side is something up like JavaScript. But for right now, I'm going to paste those two in here. And so now I have a book format, and I want to get this thing out of books data and put it into scan in books app dot book service reference, right? I'm going to pretend that all this stuff is in the same namespace just so I can keep it simple. So there's that one, and there's this one. And yes, I'll need a reference to system component model data annotations. Okay. So now I've done that, we'll build again. Let's see what we got. Okay, still can't find book format. Get rid of books data. Okay, doesn't like books data again. This is now books reference title. Again. Sorry about the boringness here. I'm just basically making sure all this stuff compiles. Okay, one more file. Oops. Okay, we'll kill that. Not sure what that was all about. Okay, great. So now we've gotten past that first set of errors, which is just I needed to convert from the books data entity data model over to the generated service classes, right? So I've done all that. And really the next set of changes is now my books entities no longer has a default constructor, right? I'm no longer dealing with a database query here when I look up a book. Instead, I am dealing with the service query. And so I need basically a new constance. class, and this is a public static class, which is basically a public or a property, which is a URI, which is a, actually, you know what? Let me just do it this way. Public static, URI service URI equals new URI of, of this. Okay. Now, when we take that constant service URI, and everywhere I see this, this is going to be constants. Constants. Having some typing problems. Apologize for that. And what does it need? Okay, so now it's saying, oh, this thing is no longer using. It's now just a regular, variable. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to use it everywhere that this problem is occurring. So that was when I want to look up a book. Here is when I query for the initial set of books. Here is when I'm saving. And that should be it. Actually, it should just be 3 queries in there. Okay, sweet. The next error that we want to deal with is I was checking for database concurrency validation errors, and I don't even have a notion of that because I'm not hitting the database, I'm hitting the service. So I'm just going to change this to a general exception and sort of comment out. In fact, I don't even need that anymore, do I? Okay, let me get rid of the try. Let me get rid of the catch. Okay, if it throws, it throws. I don't need to log. Okay, we should be down to 2 sets of errors. Excellent. Okay, so this is actually, all of that stuff was sort of converting, wasn't really related necessarily to WCF Data Services. Now we need to go back to the slides and we need to worry about this stuff. So everywhere that I want to update, I need to call update or add or delete. And everywhere I want to change a link, I need to call setLink. Okay, so what I was doing here is saying context titles.add, and that's not there anymore. What I have to say now is I have to do the add object thing, or there's a helper overload which is called add to titles. Okay, so that's that. Add to titles. And then and I need to do that basically everywhere I've created a new object. And there's a implied new. In fact, I could change it. Let's change it to where it is. Look up right there. So really, this is where I'm creating the new title, right? So I create the new title, and then I call add to titles on that thing. And then I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but we'll see later on. Here I'm creating a new publisher, so I need to do the same thing. So context add to publishers, publisher, and then here I'm adding a new author, right? So I've done the author, so I say add to authors. Okay, great. So that's the first set. And then the second set is where I'm doing these linking type things. So here's, I'm setting the publisher of the title. And this is a link from, this is a many to the one publisher. So to do that in the context, I need to say set link. So set link is for a many to one. It's actually, you don't even need to worry about what's on one side, but it's a to one is a set link, and then a to many is an add link. Okay, so here we're talking about a set link on this, and we want to set title publisher publisher. Okay, but we also need the link to go the other way. So we'll say context.add link, and we'll say publisher now has an additional title. Right? So we've basically hooked these two objects up, if that makes sense. All right, and then down here, we've got a many-to-many Ooh, this one's a tricky one, right? So now here we say context.addLink, and we want to add a link from title to authors, but we also want to add from author to titles. Oops. Okay. And that should do it, I think. Is there anything else? Oh, yes. Okay. So notice here, it's a good thing I was on this because I totally would have spaced on it otherwise. Notice here that when we're doing a lookup author by text, so you know, I grab the book and I parse out the text, then I want to look up to see if that author exists currently in the system, and if not, I want to go ahead and add it, right? And that was fine when we were talking about a two-tiered application where the you know, the application was talking directly to the database. You know, so there's a couple of different adds going on there, no big deal. But now that we're talking about across the service boundary, we're talking about a big hop, not a little hop, then we may have an issue with this, doing this multiple times. So I'm actually going to take out this save changes. And I'm going to do the final thing here, which is when I save the full object, I want to save everything all at once. And so if you look, there's a save change options of batch here. I want to batch all of my, if I added the title, if I added an author, if I added a publisher, all the links I did, everything. I just want to push that up to the service, right, to be more efficient that way. I think that's it. Let's give it a run. So if everything worked correctly here, when we come up, now we're going to be issuing a query to get the books using the data service rather than issuing a query to the database. I can prove that using something like Fiddler, and I'll just go ahead and run. Okay, so there was the query. Oh, localhost. That's a bummer. So 1 second. Let's see. How can I change this? Oh, I know. I can do this. I think it's localhost.fiddler. I think that's right. Going off the beaten path, never a good idea in a demo, but what? XAML parse exception. Oh, is this probably an error in the, that's a bummer. Okay, hold on. Is it localhost fiddler? Just 1 quick second. Fiddler localhost proxy address local. That's good enough. Okay, you can do it in the browser, manual configuration. Let me try one more search with alias. If not, I may have to just forget the fiddler thing. My app will access an alias. That's for modifying the I've done that before, but that's not what I want to do here. There should be a built-in alias. Built-in alias, my app, IPv4 fiddler. Okay, localhost.fiddler I think is right then, but let's try IPv4. Maybe there was an issue with IPv4. We're going to build, we're going to run. I forgot to run fiddler. Okay, let's try it. No. Okay, I'm sorry. Fiddler thing is a bad idea, obviously. We can always use. All right, well, let's see if it works. Let's just try that. Okay, yes, it did. I can't prove that it's not going through the database connection right now, but trust me, it is. And then let's just make sure that we can get our add new working. And this is the book. Uh-oh. Oh, singular default. Yeah, so there's some additional restrictions in terms of LINQ. I did forget something when I was modifying that. So there's some additional restrictions, some things that are not quite the same between DataServiceContext and ME framework. And one of those is single or default. Entity framework has a single or default that, I thought it was single or default. Has one of those that takes a lambda. There you go. And this one doesn't. And now let's try that again. I'll even put the breakpoint so we can see the code running. Okay. Oops. Come on. There we go. Okay. No, it's still not liking that. Singular default. Is it first or default? Maybe first or default. Hold on. So let me search for singular default. Okay. Okay, let's see if that helped. All right, let me just view the detail here. Something is obviously going on here. Okay. Resource not found for the segment titles. Resource not found for the segment titles. What? Okay, that is a different error than I was expecting here. Resource not found for the segment titles. Okay, so we've got new books entities. We're creating this service URI, which we know this is the correct service URI because we can hit it here. Oh, son of a, I bet that was it. Okay, let's try that. Hold on one second. Okay, let's see. Now it puts it automatically in the browser. I don't know if it does the same thing here, though. Ugh. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to copy it to the clipboard. We're going to click OK. I might have to debug the other side. Tell you what, we've only got 5 minutes left. Let me take some questions first, and then I'll come back and fix this so that when you guys get the code, you'll have the right thing. Resource not found for the segment titles. I don't know what that means. It's weird that I didn't hit this error last night. Obviously I did something different last night, but I'm not certain what it is right now. Okay. Will you be posting this recorded presentation on the net so that we can view it again later? Absolutely, yes. So the link will be on the develop homepage. So if you go to develop. And if you go to free webcast, view all, it'll be posted here. Also the demo solutions, yes, the demo solutions I'm posting on my blog. So let me give you a quick, that's www.brainhurtsconsulting.com. Okay, and I'll just paste that into the chat window. Not the questions window, the chat window. Oh, Mary also says they will receive an email in a day or two with the link. By the way, the link to the recording. And there is, sorry. There is the link to my blog. And I will go ahead and post that this afternoon so that you guys all have that as soon as I fix this error. Were there any other questions about the work that I did? I guess we should probably go back to the slide real quick just to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then we'll try and get this error fixed. So in terms of change tracking, again, we had to explicitly call update or add or set link, etc. These are the options that you can call in save change options. So we wanted to say batch updating. There's another one where replace on update instead of trying to merge the properties in, and then continue on error, and you, even if the first one causes an error, you keep sending the additional requests. Okay, so actually that was it. So we talked about exposing the data model as a REST service. We talked about how difficult that is ordinarily. I actually didn't go over a couple of these things, including operations using WebGet and WebInvoke. I'll talk about that later in the next module. We talked about leveraging HTTP and AtomPub and how the verbs are mapped to the SQL commands, the queries are translated into URIs, and then the result is sent back. It also includes the links to the related entities, so it is a REST level 3 service. Can use the JSON format for browser clients, so I didn't emphasize this, but let me just quickly show you on the titles. Let's see, actually, yeah, this is fine. Let's see, so people, I'm not sure if people is going to work here, actually. Let me try this one. Books data service, and then $ format equals JSON. Titles. No. That works without the format, and it doesn't work with the format, yeah. Let me try one other thing. Okay, so the format equals JSON. I will go into this more on the next talk. You can add in support for that. I had heard that they had support for that built into 5.3 and greater. I'm using 5.5 now, so there may be some sort of different option or something you have to do here. Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. Okay, I just left out a question mark was the big issue. So there it is with the format as JSON. You can see that there's my collection, name, Scott, age, etc. There's my entire collection. And you can see it's actually much smaller, right? So if you're trying to save on bandwidth, and there's the XML version, and there's the JSON version. You can see the difference, right? And then, of course, the same thing should work for books. So in a prior version, just to continue with my thought, in a prior version, you actually had to add that in via special behavior. Books data service /service. So there's the JSON version of that. And you could probably, again, watch the scroll bar here. So, bam, that's a teeny, teeny scroll bar, and then you add on the format as JSON, and it gets much smaller. So that can save on your serialization costs. In a prior version, you actually had to add in a behavior in order to enable the formatting via JSON or XML. But as of 4.5, I think it was the WCF 4.5 where they had the automatic format selection. If you grab the latest version of WCF Data Services, it should use that automatically to support format JSON and format XML by default. Okay. Any other questions? You're welcome, Gary. Anything else before I think we'll probably call it quits, and then I'll fix the error and I'll put what the error was in my blog before I post it this evening. Okay. Anybody else? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Sorry I couldn't get the ad working. I haven't seen that before, and obviously there's something weird going on. I will have to do some Google searches to figure that out, and I'll fix it, zip it, put it on the blog, and also let you know what the error was. Thanks, everyone, for joining.